Hi everybody, welcome to Live Blogger. I have combined all the videos in the stories design series into this single long video so that it's easy for you to follow along. This is what we're going to design in this video. So this is the stories design, and if I click on any of these stories, we have it displayed over here in full screen mode, and we can go to the next and the previous stories over here. And if I click on this close button, we exit the full screen mode. And then in the end, I'll also show you how to add this to your Blogger website. And I will also leave the link of the source code in the description, so you can just go ahead and copy and paste to your website. So let's get started. Now you can see this type of design in a lot of social media platforms. So for example, on Instagram, you can see these types of stories. And here we can see we have all these stories over here. And if I scroll to the right, we can see there are more stories. And if I click on any of these stories, we can see that it is displayed over here in full screen mode. And after some time, it goes on to the next story. And we can also click on the next and the previous buttons to go to the next and the previous stories. And we also have the title of the story displayed over here. And if I click on this close button, it goes back to this view right here. So if I click on any of these stories, that story will be displayed. And we can go to the next and the previous stories. So this is what we're going to design in this tutorial series using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. And this is also responsive, so if I just decrease the width of the screen, this is how it will look. So we have smaller width and height for these stories, and if I click on any of these stories, we have width of 100% for this title, and we have some changes in the design. So let's get started. Right here I have this folder called stories, and I just opened it with VS Code. And I also have this folder called images, and in that we have all these images. So we have a thumbnail image and a PNG of the image. So this is the full screen image, and we have 8 images with thumbnail and the full images. Alright, now let's start by creating an HTML file. So let's click on new file, and we'll just name it index.html. And we also need to have a CSS file, so let's create a new file, and I'll just name it style.css. And we'll also create a JavaScript file. I'll just name it main.js. Let's start with the index.html file, and in VS Code you have this shortcut where you can just press exclamation and press tab, and you'll have this basic HTML5 code. And here I'll just link the CSS file, so I'll just type link and press tab, and in the href I'll just type style.css, and in the body I'll just link the JavaScript file, so I'll just type script, and in the src I'll just type main.js. Alright, now for all these stories, we will create a container division. So let's create a division with the class of stories container. And in that, for each of these stories, we'll just create a division with the class of content. And in the content, we will have the image. So I'll just create an img tag. And in the src, I'll just type images / and we'll just type one-thumb.png. Right now, let's open this in our browser and let's see how it looks. So I have this extension called Live Server installed in VS Code. So once you install that, you can just right click over here in the HTML and click on Open with Live Server. And here we can see that our image is displayed over here in the browser. Now in the same way, we need to have a lot more images. So here we can see we have 8 images over here. So I'll just go back to our HTML, and I'll just copy this and paste it 7 more times. And I'll just change the image URLs. So for the second one, I'll just type 2-thumb.png, and then we have 3, and then we have 4, and 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now we are directly adding these images over here for now, but later on we will add these using JavaScript. So the number of the content divisions will depend on how many images we have in the JavaScript array. But for now we'll just keep it like this so that we can style it in the CSS. And this is with the stories container division. Now let's write the HTML for the full screen. So here we can see in full screen we have the image, the left and the right arrows, and then we have this title, and then we have this close button. So let's go back and let's create a division with the class of story full, and in this we'll create a division with the class of content. And in that, the first thing we need to have is the close button. So let's create a division with the class of close btn, and let's add the image of close icon over here. So for that we'll just use hero icons. So you can just go to heroicons.com and just search for the icon over here. So I'll just type close, and now let's click on copy SVG, and let's go back and let's paste the SVG over here. Now we need to change the color of this SVG to white. So let's change the stroke color and let's change it to white. And now the next thing we need to have is the left arrow. So let's create a division with the class of left arrow. And let's go back and let's type left over here. And let's copy the SVG of chevron left. And let's paste it over here. And here also I'll just change the color to white. And the next thing we need to have is the image. So let's tap img. And here I'll just type images/1.png. So this is the full image. And then we will have the right arrow. So let's create a division with the class of right arrow. And let's go back and here I'll just type right. And let's copy this chevron right. And let's paste it over here. And we'll also change the color to white. Now the last thing we need to have is the title. So let's create a division with the class of title. And here I'll just type test title. Right now let's go back to our website. And here you can see all the images are displayed over here. And we also have the full screen image over here. We also have the title displayed over here, and we also have the next and the previous arrows. But since they are white in color, we cannot see it over here. So that's basically it with the HTML of our stories design. Now we have already linked our style.css file over here. So let's go to the style.css file. And let's start with the styling of this stories container division. So if you go back to the HTML, here we can see we have this division with the class of stories container. So let's target that. Let's type stories container. And the first thing we will do is we will make all these images one next to the other. So for that, let's type display of flex. And now we can see all the images are one next to the other. Right now let's set a height and a width for these images. So here we can see we have this height and width for the image. And we also have a round shape for the image. So if you go back to the index.html file, here we can see inside the stories container division, we have a division with the class of content, and in that we have the img tag. So let's target that. Here I'll just type stories container, content, img, and let's set the height and the width to 90 pixels. And we'll also type border radius and set it to 50% so that we have round shape. And now let's go back to our browser, and here we can see we have this round shape for these images. Now the next thing we will do is we will fix the aspect ratio. So here I'll just type object fit and set it to cover. And now we can see we have the correct aspect ratio. Alright, now let's go back to styling the stories container. So here we can see we have this box shadow for this stories container. So let's add some more styles over here. So I'll just set the background color to white. And we'll also add a box shadow. And we'll set the values to 0, 3 pixels, 24 pixels, negative 8 pixels, RGBA, 0, 0, 0 and 0.3. And we'll also set a width. So let's type width and let's set it to 700 pixels. And we'll also bring it to the center. So I'll just type margin, 0 for top and bottom and auto for left and right. Now let's add a padding. So let's type padding and let's set it to 8 pixels. And we'll also add border radius and let's set it to 8 pixels. Now let's also add some gap between these images. So for that, let's type gap and let's set it to 16 pixels and let's see how it looks. And I think we can increase it a little bit more. So let's try 48 pixels. And I think that looks alright. Now the next thing we will do is we will hide everything that goes outside this stories container division. So we don't want to display these images over here on the right. So here I'll just type overflow and set it to hidden. And now we can see all the other images are not being displayed over here. And now the next thing we need to do is we need to be able to scroll to the right. So here I'll just type overflow X and set it to scroll. And now here we can see we are able to scroll to the right. Right now the next thing we will do is we'll create this outer circle. So first of all, we need to have this white circle over here, and after that we need to have this red circle. So for that we will use the before and the after selectors. So here let's type stories container content : before, and let's type content. And if we just type 1, 2, 3 over here, we can see that 1, 2, 3 is displayed over here before all these images. So in this way we can add additional information to our web page. Now we don't want to have 1, 2, 3 displayed, so let's delete this. And here we will just set the height and the width. So let's set the height to, let's try 98 pixels and the width to 98 pixels. And for the first circle we need to have a background color of white. And we'll also set the border radius to 50% so that we have a circle. And now what we will do is we'll position this before selector relative to the content. So let's type stories container content, and here let's type position relative, and here we'll just type position absolute, and let's set the top position to 50% and the left position to 50%. Now if we save this and go back, here we can see we have this circle starting from the center. Now we need to bring it to the center exactly. So for that you have to type transform translate and set it to negative 50% for the x and the y axis. And now we can see it is in the center exactly. Now we want the image to be on top of the white circle. So what we will do is we'll go over here to the img tag, and here we'll just type z index, and let's set it to 300. And we also need to set the position to something. So here we can see we have a position set to absolute. So we have to add some kind of position over here so that the z index should work. So I'll just type position relative, and now we can see we have this image, and outside the image we have the white circle, but we cannot see it right now. So let's also create the other circle. So let's go back, and for that we will use the after selector. Now it will also have almost the same styles, so let's copy this and let's paste it over here, and let's change the height, and let's change it to 106. Let's change the width to 106, and let's change the background color, and let's set it to linear gradient. And for the first color I'll just type DD2A7B, and then for the second color I'll just type F58529. Now we also need to set the z index for both these circles. So for the white circle let's set a z index of 101, and for this one let's set a z index of 100. And here we need to use the after selector, not the before selector, so let's tap after. Alright, now we can see we have both the circles displayed over here. Now the image is displayed a little bit to the top, so let's fix that. Now to fix this you can use a line of code in the img selector called vertical align and set it to middle. And now we can see everything is looking alright. Now I think we can add some more padding to this stories container. So let's go back over here to the stories container, and for the padding let's set it to, for left and right we will set a padding of 32 pixels, and for top and bottom we will set a padding of 16 pixels. Let's see how it looks. I think we can increase it a little bit more. So let's try 20 pixels over here for top and bottom, and for left and right let's try 36 pixels, and I think that looks alright. So that's basically it with the design of this stories container. Now in this video we will add the design of this full screen story mode. So let's get started. Right, this is the source code, and if you go to the index.html file, here we can see for the full screen mode we have this division with the class of story full. So first of all let's target this division right here. So here I'll just type story full, and let's set the background color to dark gray. Let's set the position to fixed, and we'll set the left position to 0 and the top position to 0, and we'll set the height to 100 viewport height and the width to 100%. And let's see how it looks right now. So here we can see we have this full screen mode displayed over here. We have the background color displayed. Now this full screen should be on top of all the other elements, so let's add a z index over here. So let's type z index and let's set it to 500. And now we can see we have the story full division on top of all the other divisions. Alright, first of all let's style this close button over here. So if you go back to the index.html file, here we can see we have this division with the class of close btn. So let's target that. So here I'll just type story full close btn, and let's set the position to fixed, and we'll set the right position to 32 pixels, and we'll set a top position of 32 pixels, and let's set the width to 32 pixels. and we'll set the cursor to pointer. Now we can see we have this close button over here. Now we have the next and the previous arrows over here. So let's go back to our source code and let's go to the index.html file. And here we can see we have this division with the class of left arrow for the left arrow, and then we have a division with the class of right arrow. So first of all, let's set a height to these icons. So let's go back to our CSS and let's type story full content left arrow, comma, story full content right arrow, and we will set a width of 60 pixels. Now let's style the content division inside the story full division. So if we go back to the index.html file, here we can see inside the story full division we have this division with the class of content. So here I'll just type story full content, and let's set the height to 100% of the parent, and we will set the display to flex so that all these elements will be one next to the other, and I will also set align items to the center. Right now let's style this image. So let's type story full img and let's set the height to 90%. Now let's bring all of this to the center. So let's go back to the container division, which is the story full division, and let's set the display to flex, align items to the center, and justify content to the center. And now we can see everything is in the center. And for this left and right arrows, let's also add cursor to pointer. So here I'll just type cursor pointer. Right now let's style this title. For the title we have a division with the class of title, and it is inside the content division. So we'll position this title relative to the content division. So for the content division, let's set a position of relative. And now let's target the title. So let's type story full content title, and let's set the position to absolute. And now let's set the bottom position to 26 pixels, and let's set the left position to 50%, and let's also add a background color. Let's set it to white. And here we can see that the title starts from the center, so we have to type transform translate x and set it to negative 50%. Now we can see it is exactly in the center. And let's set the line height to 2, and we'll also add a padding of 8 pixels top and bottom and 32 pixels left and right. So that's basically it with the title, and with this we have completed the design of the full screen mode of the story. Alright, this is our source code, and if you go to the index.html file, here we can see that we have all these content divisions over here, and in that we have all these images. So as of now we have just hard coded all these images over here. So we have this first image over here, the second image, and so on. And because of that we have all these images displayed over here. Right now we cannot see the images, so let's just hide this full screen mode for now. So let's go to the style.css file and let's go to the story full division. So this is the full screen division right here. So what I will do is I'll just set the opacity to 0, and I will also set the pointer events to none. And now we can see that all the stories are displayed over here. And I think we can decrease the width of this story container over here. So if I just right click over here and click on inspect, and let's select stories container, and let's just decrease the width a little bit. And I think 640 looks alright, so let's do that. Let's go back to the CSS and let's go to the stories container. Let's change this to 640 pixels. Right now here we can see that all these stories are displayed over here because we have hard coded all those images over here in the HTML. Now let's go ahead and comment all this code over here. So I'll just press command / or control / and we can see that all this code has been commented. Now if we go back to our stories container, we can see we have this empty stories container over here. Now what we will do is we will display all the stories dynamically using JavaScript. So let's go back to our source code and let's go to the main.js file, and we have already linked our main.js file over here in the index.html file. So let's start by creating an array. So let's type const and we'll name the array all stories. Now we'll create an array of objects. So in this array we will have several objects. So let's create an object, and in the object we need to have the thumbnail URL. So let's type thumb URL. You can name this anything you want, and let's provide the thumbnail URL over here. So if you go to the images folder, here we can see we have all these thumbnail images and the full images. So let's type images /1-thumb thumbnail.png. So this is the first image thumbnail, and the next thing we need to have is the full image. So let's name it image URL, and let's add the image link over here. So let's type images/1.png. So here we can see for the full image we have this image named 1.png, and then we also need to have the title. So let's type title, and for the first one let's add a title of title number 1. So this is our object. Now in this way we need to create all these objects. So let's copy this and I'll just paste it 7 more times. Now for the second one we have the thumbnail URL set to 2-thumb.png, and this one is 2.png, and here we will add title number 2. Now in the same way let's go ahead and change the URLs and the titles of all these images. Alright, so here I have changed the URLs and the titles of all these images. So we have 8 objects over here in total in this array. Now let's go ahead and display all these images in our browser. So let's create a for loop, and we will loop through all these items inside the array, and we'll create this structure over here. So here we can see we have this division with the class of content, and in that we have the img tag with the source of the image thumbnail URL. So let's go ahead and do that. Here we can see the name of the array is all stories. So let's type all stories.forEach, and this will loop through all the items inside the array. Now for each of the stories I'll just call it S. You can call this anything you want, and let's create an arrow function over here. Now the first thing we need to do is create a division with the class of content. So let's type const, and let's give it a name of content, and here to type equals document.createElement, and here we need to type div because we need to create a division, and we need to give it a class of content. So let's type content, which is this constant right here, .classList.add, and here we'll just type content. So this is the content division. Now we need to create the img tag. So let's type const, and I will just name it img equals document.createElement, and we need to have an img tag. So let's type img over here, and we need to set the source of this img to the thumbnail URL. So let's type img.setAttribute, and we need to set the src attribute, and the value should be the thumbnail URL. So let's type s, which is the current story, dot, and then we can see we have this thumb URL over here. Alright, now the next thing we need to do is we need to add the content division inside the stories container division. So here we can see all these content divisions are inside the stories container division. So for that, first of all, let's get the reference of the stories container. So let's type const stories container equals document.querySelector stories container, and now here we'll type stories container dot append child, and here we need to type content. So now this content division will be appended inside the stories container division. Now we need to append the image inside the content division. So let's type content dot append child img. Right, now let's go back to our web page, and here we can see we have all these images displayed over here, and these are displayed dynamically using JavaScript. So let's test it out. Let's delete some of these images and let's see whether we have the changes. So I'll just delete all these images. I'll just keep 2 of these images over here, and now if you go back we can see that we have just 2 images over here. So all the images are indeed generated using JavaScript. So now you can go ahead and add your own images over here. You can add any number of images you want over here. You can add the title, image URL, and the thumbnail URL over here inside the JavaScript, and all this code will be automatically generated for you. Now in this video we will add the functionality of displaying the stories in full screen mode. So let's get started. Right, so here I'm in the JavaScript, and let's scroll down over here, and this is the all stories for each loop. And now let's go ahead and add an event listener to this content. So here we'll just type content.add event listener, and we will listen for the click event, and let's create an arrow function over here. And the first thing we need to do is display the story full division. So if you go back to the index.html file, here we can see that we have this division with the class of story full, and if you go to the style.css file and if you scroll down, here we can see for the story full class we have set the opacity to 0 for now. So what we will do is when we click on the story, we will set the opacity back to 1 and also the pointer events to auto. And we'll also have a smooth transition, so let's type transition and let's set it to all 100 milliseconds ease. And let's go ahead and create storyful.active, and here we'll set the opacity to 1 and pointer events to auto. Right now when we click on this content, which is this story right here, so in the HTML file, here we can see we have this division with the class of content, and in that we have the image. So when we click on the content, we want to set the active class to the story full division. So first of all, let's reference the story full division over here in the JavaScript. So here I'll just type const story full equals document.querySelector story full, and now let's go ahead and type storyfull.classList.add, and we will add the active class. And the next thing we need to do is we need to set the image source. So right now we can see that we have hard coded this image URL over here. Now we have to set the image to the current image of the story. So let's go ahead and access this image in our JavaScript. So here I'll just type const and I'll just give it a name of story full image equals document.querySelector, and here let's type story full img. So this will target the image inside the story full division. Right now let's go ahead and set the source of this image. So here I'll just type story full image dot set attribute, and we'll set the src attribute to the current image. So the current story is referred to as s over here in this for each loop. So let's type s dot image URL. This is the URL of the full image. The next thing we need to do is add the title. So if you go back to the index.html file, here we can see we have this division with the class of title, and in that we have this text over here. Now we need to replace this test title with the current title of the story. So let's access this title. Let's go over here to JavaScript and let's create a constant. Let's type const and let's name it story full title equals document.querySelector story full title. Right now let's scroll down, and here we will first of all check whether we have the title for this story. So let's add an if condition, and let's type exclamation s dot title. So this if condition will check whether we have a title inside the current story. So here we can see we have this title keyword over here. So it will check whether we have the title. So this is for the condition where the title is not available. So if you don't have the title, then we will set the display to none. So let's type story full title dot style dot display, and let's set it to none. And if we have the title, then we will add the code inside the else. So here first of all, let's set the display back to block. So let's type story full title dot style dot display equals block, and let's set the text of the title to the current title. So let's type story full title dot inner HTML equals, and let's set it to the current story, which is s dot title. Right now let's save this and let's go back to our browser and let's click on one of these stories, and we can see that the story is displayed over here in full screen mode, and we also have the title number 1. Let's refresh this page and let's select another story. Let's select this story right here, and now we can see that this story is displayed over here in full screen mode, and we also have the current title. Right now let's add an event listener to this close button. So when we click on this close button, we want to hide this full screen mode. So first of all, let's reference that over here in the JavaScript. If you go back to the index.html file, let's see what is the class for the close button. So we have a division with the class of close btn. So let's access that over here. Here we just type const close btn equals document.querySelector story full close btn, and let's add an event listener. So let's type close btn dot add event listener, and we will listen for the click event, and let's create an arrow function over here. Now when we click on the close button, we want to hide the full screen mode. So for that we have to remove the active class from the story full division. So let's tap story full dot class list dot remove, and let's tap active over here. Right now let's go back and let's open the story, and let's click on the close button, and we can see that the story is being closed. So the close button is working alright. We'll also set the cursor to pointer when we hover over these stories. So let's go back to the style.css file, and let's go to the content, and here for the content let's set the cursor to pointer. And now when we hover over this, we have the pointer. Right now the next thing we will do is we will add the functionality for the next and the previous arrows over here. So let's go back to our JavaScript. Now the first thing we need to do is we need to track the index of the current story. So for example, if I click on this third image right here, we can see that we have the third story displayed over here in full screen mode. Now when we click on the next button, we need to display the fourth image. So for that we need to have an idea of which image is currently displayed over here. So let's go back, and what we will do is when we click on the content division, we'll also store the current index inside a variable. So let's create a variable over here, and let's name it current index, and by default let's set it to 0. Now let's go inside this for each loop, and when we click on the content division, let's go ahead and update this current index variable. So let's tap current index equals, and we need to get the index of the current story. So for that we need to add one more variable over here. So this one is for the story, and we'll add a comma, and we'll just name it I. So this will be the story and this will be the index. So let's set the current index to I. So now this variable will have the current index stored over here. Now let's go ahead and add the functionality of the next and the previous buttons. So if you go back to the index.html file, here we can see we have this division with the class of left arrow, and we also have a division with the class of right arrow. Let's reference them inside the JavaScript. So let's create a constant. Let's name it left arrow equals document.querySelector story full left arrow, and let's tap const right arrow equals document.querySelector story full right arrow. Right now let's add event listeners to these two constants. So here just tap left arrow dot add event listener, and we will listen for the click event, and let's create an arrow function over here. Now here the first thing we need to do is add an if condition to check whether we are on the first index. So if you are on the first index, for example if you are here in the first story, and now if you click on this previous button, we don't want anything to happen. So let's add an if condition, and let's see whether the current index is the first one. So let's tap current index is greater than 0. Then the first thing we will do is set the current index to 1 less than the current index. So let's tap minus equals 1. So for example, if the current index is 4, it will set it to 3. Right now the next thing we need to do is we need to set the image source and the title. So we can just copy these lines of code from here, and let's paste it over here, and let's make some changes. So here for the src, let's set the image URL of the current index. So let's delete this, and let's type all stories, which is the name of the array, and for the index value let's tap current index, and here we'll just tap dot image URL, and here instead of s title we need to type all stories, and for the index let's type current index dot title, and even here we need to set it to all stories and current index dot title. Right now let's see whether this works. So let's go back and let's click on one of these stories, and let's click on the previous button, and we have the previous image and the title displayed over here. Let's click on the previous button once more, and we have the first image and title displayed over here. And now if we click on this previous button, we don't have anything happening over here. Let's take a look at the console and let's see whether we have any errors. And we don't have any errors over here. So everything is working alright. Right now let's add the functionality of the next button. So it is pretty much the same as the previous button. So I'll just copy this code from here, and let's paste it down here, and I'll just change left arrow to right arrow, and let's change minus equals to plus equals. And here for the if condition, we need to check whether this is the last story. So let's type less than all stories, which is the name of the array, dot length minus 1, because arrays start with 0. Right, now let's go back to the browser and let's see whether it works. So let's click on one of these stories and let's click on the next button, and we have everything working alright. Let's click on the previous button and it is also working alright. So that's basically it with the next and the previous buttons. Now in this video I'll show you how to add a timer. So if I go to the original design and if I click on one of these stories, we can see that after a set amount of time it moves on to the next story. So we have to add that timer to our current story over here. Now before getting started with the timer, let's just make this design responsive. So right now if I just decrease the width of the screen, this is how it looks. So let's make it responsive. Alright, so here's my source code. Let's go to the style.css file and let's create a media query. So let's type at media, and we will set a max width of, let's try 700 pixels. Now if the screen width is less than 700 pixels, then whatever styles we have inside this block will be added to the design. So the first thing we will do is we will change the width of the stories container. So if you scroll up, here we can see for the stories container we have set a width of 640 pixels. So here what we will do is let's select stories container, and we will set the width to 90% of the screen width, and we also need to set the box sizing to border box. So let's scroll over here and let's type box sizing and let's set it to border box, and now we can see we have 90% width of the screen. And if I increase the width of the browser window, this is how it looks, and this is how it looks on a mobile screen. Right, now let's change the height and the width of the content image, the content before and the content after. So let's add the selectors over here. So let's type stories container content img, and we will set the width and the height to 60 pixels. And now let's select the content before. So let's type stories container content colon before, and let's set the height and the width to 70 pixels. Right, now let's select the content after. So let's type stories container content colon after, and let's set the width and the height to 80 pixels. Alright, so that's how it's gonna look on a mobile device. Now let's open the full screen mode. So let's select one of these stories and let's make some changes over here. So let's type story full, which is the division for the full screen mode, and in that we have a content division, and in that we have the img. So if you go back to the HTML file, here we can see inside this story full division we have this content division, and in that we have this image. So let's set the height of the image to 60%. I think we can increase it a little bit. Let's try 65%, and I think that looks alright, and I think that looks alright for a mobile device. Right, now let's get started with the timer. Now what we need to do is we need to perform the same operation that happens when we click on the next button over here. So we need to add a timer and call this function for the next arrow. So let's go to the JavaScript, and if you scroll down, here we can see for the right arrow we had added this event listener, and this is all the code that we have for going to the next story. So what I'm going to do is I'll just cut this code from here and I'll just create a function. So let's create a function called next story, and I'll just paste the code over here, and I'll just call this function over here. So here I'll just type next story, and now let's go back to our design and let's see whether everything works alright. Let's click on this story and let's click on the next button, and everything is working alright. Right, now let's go back and let's add a timer. Now what we need to do is we need to start a timer over here when we click on the content. So here in the event listener of the content, let's add the timer. So here I'll just type set interval, and here we need to call the function next story, and then we need to add the timing. So let's set it to 5 seconds. So let's type 5000, which is 5 milliseconds. And now let's see whether this works. So let's go back and let's click on one of these stories. And here we can see after 5 seconds we are going to the next story. So everything is working alright. Now we have some problems to solve in this timer. So if I click on one of these stories and if I wait for 4 seconds, and now if I click on the next button, we can see that it immediately moves to the next story because it had already passed 4 seconds, and if I click on the next button, it goes to the next story and it just has 1 second to stay on that story. So what we need to do is we need to clear the timer every time we click on the content or every time we click on the next and the previous buttons. So let's go ahead and call a function called clear interval, and here we need to add the name of the interval. So let's go ahead and create a variable over here. I'll just name it timer, and now let's scroll down, and here I'll just type timer equals set interval, and here I'll just pass the name of the timer. So I'll just type timer over here, and we'll do the same for the next and the previous buttons. So let's copy this clear interval code from here. We'll also copy the second line, and let's scroll down, and here for the left arrow, let's add these lines of code over here, and we'll do the same for the next story. So here after next story, let's add these 2 lines of code. Right now let's go back to our website and let's click on one of these stories, and now let's wait for 3 or 4 seconds and let's click on the next button, and now we can see that the timer is reset and it waits again 5 seconds to go to the next story. So everything is working alright. So that's basically how you add a timer to these stories. Alright, now let's go to the dashboard of our Blogger website, and we can add this design into a post or a page, or you can even add it to all the pages in your website by just going to theme and then clicking on this arrow and clicking on edit HTML and just add the code over there. Now in this video I'll show you how to add it inside a post. So let's go to posts and let's create a new post. You can also add it inside any of the existing posts. Alright, let's go over here to new post, and I'll just add a title of stories. And the first thing you have to keep in mind is that you have to go to the HTML view. So by default it will be in the compose view. So click on this button and click on HTML view. Now here you can add the HTML, the CSS and the JavaScript. So first of all, let's add the CSS. I'll just create a style tag over here, and now let's go to the source code of our design, and I will leave the link of the source code in the description. So let's go to style.css file, and let's copy all these styles from here, and let's paste it over here inside the style tag. Right now let's go outside the style tag and let's add the HTML. So let's go back to our source code, let's go to the index.html file, and let's copy everything from here till the end, and we don't need to have these commented code over here, so I'll just delete all of this. Right now let's copy everything from here all the way till the end over here, and let's paste it inside our post. And the last thing we need to do is add the JavaScript. So let's create a script tag over here, and here we will add the JavaScript. Let's go back to our source code and let's go to the main.js file, and this is all the JavaScript of our stories design. And if we scroll up, we can see that we have this all stories array over here, and in that we have all these stories. We have the thumbnail URL, we have the image URL, which is the full image URL, and also the title. Now you can go ahead and change these information. You can also add new objects by just copying this and pasting it down here and just changing these details. Right now we have these many objects over here inside this array, and all these image URLs are here inside this folder right here called images, and in that we have all these images. Now in our Blogger website we don't have this folder called images, so we have to change the image URLs. We have to upload the image somewhere and get the URL and paste it over here. But for now let's copy and paste all this code, and if we scroll down we also have some other settings over here. You can go ahead and change the timing of the autoplay of the full screen stories. So right now it is set to 5 seconds. So after 5 seconds the story will change to the next story when in the full screen mode. Right now let's copy all of this and let's go back and paste it over here inside the script tag. Now the last thing we need to do is change all these image URLs. Now for the images we will use a service called Cloudinary. So you can just go over here to cloudinary.com and just create a free account and then just log in and go to media library. And here you can go ahead and upload your images. So let's click on upload and then click on upload local files. Now let's click on browse, and these are all the images in our project. So let's select all of this and let's click on open. And here we can see all the images are uploaded inside Cloudinary. Now let's go ahead and change the URLs of all the images. So here we can see the first one over here is the full screen image of the 8th story, and this is the thumbnail. So let's go ahead and copy all the links. Now you can just click on this button called copy URL, or you can also click on options and click on copy URL from here. So let's copy this and let's paste it inside the 8th full image. So I'll just delete this and paste the URL over here. And in the same way, let's go ahead and get the thumbnail URL. So let's click on copy URL and let's paste it over here. Now in the same way, we have to go ahead and change the URL of all these images. So I'll just do that real quick. Alright, so I have updated all the image and thumbnail URLs. Now let's click on publish and confirm. And here we can see that our post has been published. Let's click on view and our stories are displayed over here, but we have some problems in the styling. So let's fix that. Let's right click over here and click on inspect. And here we can see this is a flex box. So if I just click on stories container, we can see it is set to display flex. And I think that's why it is trying to fit into this fixed width. So what we have to do is we have to add a line of code to the content, and we have to type flex shrink and set it to 0. Now we can see it works alright. So let's add this line of code to the content in the CSS. Let's go back to our post and let's go to the content. So here we can see we have the selector for the content. Here I'll just type flex shrink and let's set it to 0. Now let's update this. And let's go back to our post and let's refresh this page. And now we can see that the stories are displayed over here, and let's click on one of these stories. And we can see that it is displayed in full screen mode. And after 5 seconds it changes to the next story. And if I click on the next button, we can see the next story. And if I click on the previous button, we can see the previous story. And we can close the full screen mode by clicking on this close button. So everything is working alright. So that's basically how you add this stories design into your Blogger website. So that's basically it for this video. I will leave the link of the source code in the description, and if you have any doubts you can ask in the comments below. And if you like this video, please click on the like button and subscribe to this channel to get the latest video updates. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a nice day.